Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.
All right, we are back in full effect in the Detroit is Different podcast studios and closing out 2019. I'm bringing something that is for the family. As people talk about family spirits, somebody that's been interconnected to my family for a long time. SF Hardy, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Kari. How are you?
Everything is everything, as Donnie Hathaway would say. So let's start this whole discussion. I know you as a big sister to one of my friends from like being a kid, but along with that, very creative yourself into storytelling. You have been writing children's books recently, but always been just a creative and known so many creatives and drawn to creativity, whether that be through forms of fashion, forms of hairstyling, but right now you're expressing yourself definitely as an author. Let's get into that. What led you into writing?
Writing has always been a form of expression for me. As a child, there were times where I could not express myself verbally because I didn't feel comfortable, but I could always write it down. I would get in trouble. My mom said I had to have the last word, so I would slide a note under the door when she told me not to talk.
Okay.
In middle school, my poems were selected for the area F. There was a contest, and both 6th and 7th grade, I want to say, my poems were published, and I was awarded for those. And those poems were on the violence that was taking place at that time. Long time ago.
Okay. All right. So as we're going to come back to that, we're going to start like we start a lot of these Detroit is Different stories. Your family, how about did they come to Detroit?
My family, my maternal side of the family came from the South, Louisiana and Mississippi.
Okay.
My grandparents lived in Black Bottom. And eventually saved enough money to buy a home in Conant Gardens. And so that was their journey. They came with, part of the mass exodus from the South to the North.
Okay. So Black Bottom, do you know what neighborhood in Black Bottom or streets?
Mack and Shane.
Okay.
So right across from where the old Frederick Douglass was, the house no longer stands.
Okay. And then they moved over to the Conant Gardens area, which a lot of people, if you're from around there, you're very familiar, but you can kind of think of that like as 6 Mile Conant, 7 Mile Conant. A lot of people that went to Persian,
Corville Elementary. Yeah. So my grandparents' house was right off of Nevada in McKay.
Okay. All right. And that neighborhood, do you remember that neighborhood? Did you spend time over there as a kid?
I did. I lived there for some time. I do remember a lot. That was during the early 80s when crack epidemic hit the neighborhood. So I have some fond memories and some not so fond memories of that area. I recently rode down the street and saw the house, and it was just such disrepair. It was very disheartening, but yeah.
Okay. All right. And then dad's side, whereabouts they?
So they, my paternal great grandfather came here and grandmother came here from Hungary. And one point they lived in Mount Clemens. Then somehow they ended up the west side of Detroit. The name of the neighborhood escapes me right now, but it's a big. It was a big Hungarian population in that neighborhood at the time. So that's how they came.
Okay. And these neighborhoods and like as a child, what would you say you spent the most time at in the Nevada area, other places? Where did you kind of grow up mostly?
All over. I spent most of my childhood with my maternal side of the family. So lived on McKay. My mom and dad split up when I was about 6 or 7. My father got addicted to crack. And so that caused a great rift, as we know. And so lived on McKay. We kind of moved around. We lived off of John R. and 6 Mile. I can't think of the street. Yakoma, maybe. When I was smaller. Have a very interesting memory from that home. We lived on Tacoma on the Eastside when I was probably about 3-4 years old. That was when Tristan was born. We lived in Rochester for a short period of time, right before when my mom was pregnant with Tristan. She gave birth, and then somehow we ended up in St. Clair Shores with my great-grandfather, and then back in the city. But after that, I probably was on McKay until I was about 10, and then we moved to Deep East Side by Finney High School, where I stayed until I was about 19 and moved out the house.
Okay. And did you end up going to Finney or what school?
I did not go to Finney. I went to Crockett Technical High School, where I majored in cosmetology.
Okay, so Crockett Technical High School and the Crockett Rockets, as they have it.
Yes.
They've changed it now, but what was that school like when you went there? I remember, let's see, when was Crockett open?
So the academic portion opened, I want to say 93, 92. The first graduating class was 96.
So it was kind of like Crockett and DSA were like relatively new ideas in the mid 90s.
Yes.
So you were part of like some of the first graduating classes there at Crockett.
I was the third to graduated in 98.
Okay. So what was it like going to a school, like starting off?
For me, it was good because I was really scared to go to a big high school. I took I went to take the test to go to King. That's where my mother was going to send me. And I failed it on purpose because I was really scared to go to a big school. I didn't know how to express that at the time. And when my mom got the test results and I told her, she's like, "You going to Finney?" I was like, "I won't go to school. I'll skip every day."
Hilarious.
So, growing up in a beauty salon, I had some connections, so I ended up going to Crockett, and it was a smaller school. I think there were maybe 100 in my graduating class, so it was a little more comfortable. And I got a VOTEC, a skilled trade. So,
and that class, kind of like DSA, that Crockett class. Those early classes, and even like from the 80s, like the first Renaissance classes, like it's almost like a camaraderie. You guys are really close.
Yeah, we are. We had our 20th reunion last summer, or the summer of 2018. So everybody was really happy to see each other, and some of us still are very
really
close.
And know each other a lot more so than like, I guess, like a larger school or something else, because I don't know what it is about like the school opening up and starting, where even if you don't know each other, you sort of know each other, because the school, I guess it was so small and people were kind of interrelated.
Yeah, it helps you bond. Yeah, even you don't realize it then, but looking back.
Okay, and then being at a school that was starting off with a curriculum like that, do you remember? Do you think that the teachers and the administrators were paying more attention? And the reason I'm asking these questions right now is because so much in education in the city of Detroit is, it's a big topic, and you're a person that was experiencing that, and now, looking back at from being a mother and everything, what was that experience like? Just as the administrators were putting everything together, how intentional could they be? How much attention could they pay? In basically starting a school as it expanded.
Well, the VOTEC was established, so that was pretty consistent. Some of the academics were left a lot to be desired, but then there were some things that were very good. I often felt like it was an experiment, but I don't really have much to compare it to in terms of my experience, because that was the only high school that I went to.
Okay. And then as far as when we think of the vocation and then interacting with like the students that would come from other schools and everything, what was like, did that expand your network? Did that help you as time went on in learning that trade?
It definitely did. I developed some lifelong friendships from being in VOTEC. One of my friends, Kelly, she went to King, and we're still friends today. And it helped us to get another perspective of, how other schools were ran. But I think we all kind of share some of the same sentiments in terms of the school system. So
okay. All right. And from Crockett, where were you at in your journey?
So from Crockett, again, I didn't really want to go away to school. I had no desire to. That is my one regret, not going away to school. I ended up going to Wayne County Community College District now for dental assisting. And one day I went to class with my ex-husband, my son's father, and I realized that not all the classes were these huge lecture halls. And so that was at Wayne State, and I decided that I would enroll in Wayne State. So from there, I started off as a criminal justice major, switched to social work. Social work program was not designed for working adult. And so I ended up switching to psychology. And I had to take a Black Studies class or anthropology class. I ended up taking a Black social political thought class that I thought would satisfy the anthropology class. And I got so engrossed into the class and realized that it wouldn't satisfy that anthropology class. But I was in it then, and it was a very interesting class, and so I decided to change my major to Africana Studies.
Okay, who was the professor?
I cannot think of his name right now.
Okay.
He taught that one class, and I never saw or heard from him again.
What was he introducing to you?
Black social political thought. So
like ideas from
Marcus Garvey, Frantz Fanon, Black political thinkers, W.E.B. Du Bois, a lot of those things.
And this was new thoughts to you, or was it the way he was presenting it that was new, or you were just ready to take on these theories?
Some of both, and then having the class was very diverse. We had people from all over, different countries, and people from Detroit. And some of the things that we discussed, like colorisms amongst the Black community, was very interesting, because you had a young lady who spoke of, her grandparents encouraging her to marry or date light to keep their family light. So that was interesting to hear that. We talked about the prison industrial complex, and one of my classmates was a prison guard at the time, and she talked about how some of the males that she dealt with couldn't understand how she could work in that position because they felt like it was oppressive, but she was working a job. So we talked about a lot of current events and things that were going on in our lives as well.
Okay, and what time, what year is this?
Oh,
You would
Kari.
say.
Maybe 2006.
And the reason I ask that is because, I don't know how familiar you are with the fight for Black studies to even be
Yes,
on the campus of Wayne State.
I'm very familiar.
And the reason the Africana Studies Department existed in the first place. And right now, some of the current fights going on the campus as one of the most prevalent challenges with Wayne State has been probably for the last 40 years that the lack of Black representation in the faculty and now even they'd say the student body. And that's why I asked, because this is like that department in a lot of those classes was a solution to fights of Errol Henderson, the Cockrell family, and so many others that were involved in those battles that were going on right there in that campus. And I'm Daryl Dawsey, and there's so many other people that were fighting in the late 80s to make that happen. So like within almost like a 10-year span that existed. And, people like Gloria House and Bobby Kinfense now and a couple others, which I think that a lot of resources are needed still for that department if they're getting any resources. It was an intentional fight to have that happen.
It was, and our professors made sure that we knew that. And that's part of why I love the program, because for me, it felt like it was a community. And your instructors, your professors, they wanted to see you succeed because their success was predicated on you succeeding. The program staying alive was important. It was important for you to be able to make it. And so, yes, I'm familiar with the fight.
And that's why I'm asking. So it spoke to you to change your major into that.
Yes.
So what were some of the other philosophies that you took on in those classes and books, or some of the things that have impacted your life since then, or as you were going through, through the coursework, I should say?
Well, one of the interesting things that I was asked a lot was, what are you going to do with the major? And why are you taking it, and what is it? Although to me it's self-explanatory. So I found myself explaining a lot, but it's such a broad study. I ended up doing more of the political track, and two of the classes that were very impactful for me was a Black social movement, which Baba Kinfense was my instructor. And
shout out Kinfense Cheike.
And there was a urban labor history course, and this was the time, I don't know if you remember, when Baba Ibn Pitts was assaulted at the restaurant on Warren.
Epicurus. The Epicurus restaurant on Warren that sits basically, like I say, between Warren and Woodward and Cass.
Yep. Right off of Cass, right next to the potato place. So I actually, with my supervisor at the time, we went and we partook in the protest. Because my supervisor was older, he was from an era where you had to fight. And so we went together. I actually interviewed Baba Pitts for my labor studies class. We had to interview somebody who was over a certain age and who had worked in the plants in the automotive industry. And so he was willing to let me interview him, which was very, very enriching for me.
And can you share a little bit of his story? I know some of his overview, but I'd rather have you share a little bit of his story and who he is to Detroit and what exactly happened at Epicurus.
Well, he is an artist, and he was also a freedom fighter. He fought with one of the I can't remember if it was drum. It was one of the drums. And so that's what I interviewed him on. And at Epicurus, he was assaulted. He was next door at the copy center. I don't think it's there anymore. No. Yeah. He was making copies. He needed to use the restroom. He went into the restaurant and asked I told it was the owner's son, told him he could not use the restroom. He had a very eclectic look. So from what I remember, maybe he thought that he was a transient or something like that. Baba Pitts wouldn't take no for an answer. He went to use the restroom. As he was using the restroom, he was snatched out of the restroom, taken outside, and assaulted by the man.
By the store owner.
Right. And so that sparked a big controversy at that time. And I don't know if the person ever faced charges for what he did. Because that was part of the protest. Like, the restaurant was still open. People were still patronizing it. And he was still going to work. When this person who had fought for laborers and the people of the city was assaulted, and it was like nobody cared.
Elder as well.
Right. You know.
So during that fight and witnessing things like that, did that change your perspective of anything? Does that have an impact on you now? Did that make what you were studying seem more relevant today? What did that,
It definitely showed me that, the more things change, they stay the same. Made me more cynical. And it made me angry. I was upset. And disappointed. Like I said, people were still patronizing the restaurant. And it kind of showed me, like, you just, no matter what you do, sometimes it's not enough, and you made to feel like you don't matter.
Yes. And he's also like a heck of a muralist. Yes. I think a lot of people kind of tie him to the mural he did for Malice Green. I believe he did that mural for Malice Green. He did he does some what is that? He can do abstract art, and he also can do portraits. Just very creative, and one of the most creative people. I believe that the store owner saw him as someone that was a homeless man, so he felt that, okay, if this guy's homeless, then I can treat him any way that I feel like, including, push him out the bathroom and assault him. And I remember that because I was at the Michigan Citizen at the time, and I think that was the only newspaper that reported on that story at the time, like the Michigan Citizen often would. So finishing up your degree, so what were some of the other classes you were taking, and then what happened afterwards? What was your next step in your life's journey?
I took there was an urban studies where we talked about gentrification. And
this was early on, before a lot of the realities of Detroit.
Exactly. Today. This was right before the crash and the breakdown.
Mayor Kilpatrick was still mayor. This was Mayor Kilpatrick. Detroit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Marion Bates was my instructor for this particular class. And I remember walking in thinking, this is a Black Studies class. This woman is not Black. What am I going to gain from this? And I'm glad I stuck it out because it was one of the most rewarding classes. I did have the opportunity to meet General Baker. And also Grace Boggs, which Professor Bates took me out in the hallway to talk to Mrs. Boggs. Okay. So those are some of my fondest memories of being in the program. From there, I stayed at Wayne. I ended up going to library school. It was like between library school and law school. I wasn't ready for law school. And
okay, library school. I'm not familiar with what library school is. What is library school?
Library school is where you go to become a librarian. It's a master's program.
I never knew that. I always thought librarians. See, I thought librarians were just people that filled out an application and you learn from the other librarians.
No, we had to do a little more than that.
The naivety.
That's okay. That's okay. You learn something new every day. So I enrolled in the program, and it was a 2-year program for me. I had spent like 7 years in undergrad, but I was working, Mom. So I didn't want to do that for grad school. I wanted to go and get out, and that is what I did. I ended up getting a graduate student assistantship, and I worked at the Purdy Kresge Library, which is where I realized that I really liked the work. School to me was a little different, wasn't as challenging, so I was bored and I was ready to drop out.
Okay. So the librarian, and you're working in that facet now, and I want to pick back up with that discussion. But along with that, you said that life is going on too. Like you're a working mom too. So what's changing in your life? Because you're going from kid at Crockett to 19. You're on your own. You're out the house. You I know you had a kid. What's happening in your life along this time?
Same stuff, school, work, raising a child, just life. At that time, I was really focused on getting finished with school because I wanted to live life outside of school, but I felt like I needed to go to school because I wanted to provide a certain lifestyle for my son.
For your family.
Yeah. And I didn't want to have to depend on anybody else to give it to me. Got remarried in 2007, graduated in 2007, and ended up in grad school in 2007.
So the 2007 was a very pivotal year in your life.
It was.
007. Okay. All right. So with all of that happening, can you share a little bit? I was in a discussion, and I've been that person too. As I got my undergraduate degree from Wash as an adult student. What's that flow being an adult student? There's a lot of people that are nervous, thinking about going back to school, and it's like, oh, I don't want to be 25 in a class with 19-year-olds. What was that flow like for you?
It's never too late. Was my thing. For me, I was going to work and then going to school after work, going on the weekends, going in the summertime, going on Sunday, sometimes going on my lunch break.
So every semester you were at least like as they call that, not full-time but part-time student, and so that you can actually not fail or drop out, which a lot of people, I think that's what most people don't fail, but they'll take too many classes, then they drop out. It's like, I'll keep this one and then drop out of that one. But you just stayed at it?
Yeah, I stayed at it. It was important to me. I didn't really have a choice. I had to work and I had to go to school. So I have said, and I continue to say to people, if you want to go to school, do it. It's just about showing up and putting that effort forth. If you want to, just like with the Africana Studies program, you will have people who will help you where you need help. You have to let them know you need help. But if you want to do it, you can do it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
it's about putting that effort forth. And, you know, don't think about how long it's going to take, because you're going to let time go by and not have anything.
It'll take
Right.
longer. Yeah, it's gonna only take longer the more you
Exactly.
wait. And then what about what do you say for? Because I know that's in a lot of people's heads. The whole I'm gonna be so old and everybody else is gonna be so young. Because nowadays, especially like you go to a community college, it's gonna be some high school kids doing dual enrollment. So you're gonna be sitting next to somebody that's 15.
Exactly. Well, Baba Kafense told us that, I want to say he started when he was 37, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
He did.
It's never too late. It's, you know, we all arrive at our destination at different times. For me, I had to go then because I had this young man, and I was being an example to him, and also, you know, like I said, wanting to provide a certain lifestyle for him. So, you know, I may go back to school because I enjoy learning. So it's never too late. Sometimes we just not ready. And I would say not go when you're pressured into going, or when somebody else feels like you should go. Go when you're ready, because the experience will be that much fulfilling for you.
Okay. And also being a mom, and I'm going into this as, you know, the year's changing, it's new, and a lot of people will be listening to this. What suggestions do you have about, because you're like me, you also started in a community college. What suggestions do you have for young people with that community college or large university? You say you regret not going to the large university. What suggestions do you have there? Because I always tell young people, it's like, look, I think you should start at, if you don't know what you need to do, start at WC3 and then figure it out.
Yes, if you don't know, start there. I regret not going away to school.
Okay.
I didn't want to go to a big school. That's why I didn't go away, and that's why I didn't start off at Wayne. But, you know, the trades are wide open. There are so many things. I posted yesterday, you know, college is not for everybody. Learning is. And you are going to learn things. There's so many things I did not learn, or I put on hold because I was in school. I just couldn't do it all. And I'm doing it now. So that's why I have no desire to go back to school at this moment. But if you don't know what you want to do, or you think you know what you want to do, research it. Talk to people who are in that field. You have to go outside of yourself and expose yourself to different things so you can know what it is you want to do, or you think you want to do. I'd start off at a community college. Make sure that those classes that you're taking will transfer over. So I don't know if they have it now. I'm sure they do. They had an equivalency guide when I was at Wayne. So, because I did take some guest courses at Wayne County when I was enrolled at Wayne State. Sometimes you have to do that because the classes may not be offered when you need them to. So you may have to take some guest courses at a community college. Research what it is you think you're going into. There's a website. I can't think of it right now. But you can go in and see the projected demand for certain professions, what the pay is, where it's going to be most in demand across the country or the world. Research and use your public libraries, because they have these resources and they're there for you for free.
Well, you just led me right into the next question of the public library, because I was going to jump right back into the librarian discussion. And that's also what I know you're into the mix of doing now. So public library life, what is that like? As I think it's a great asset to most communities, but it's a less and less used asset. Whereas, you know, the biggest library we all use nowadays, I think it's Google. You know.
Yes, but even some people have to come to the library to use it, because we have that digital divide, and you still have a lot of people who are homeless, or, you know, in between homes, and so
internet access. Yeah.
So it's exciting. Sometimes it can be disappointing, because, as you said, there are so many programs and resources, and they're not all just related to books. I mean, we try to have books and resources there for you to refer to after the programs, but there's so much that you can do at the library, and not feel like, it's just a quiet place. And I implore people to utilize it more, because if you don't use it, you lose it. And just like we had to fight for the Black Studies program, poor people of color, women weren't always able to utilize the library. They were for rich white men.
Well, I can definitely share with a lot of people when they ask, how do I know a lot of this stuff about the Detroit history that I know? It's from talking to people. And along with talking to people, it's the Burton collection at our main library. The Burton collection in the Detroit main library is a collection of all Detroit history and many families, Black, white, a lot of like the drawing plans for most of the cars that were designed in the city of Detroit, blueprints for buildings and structures and roads and political plans. Like almost the archives of so many libraries are right in the Burton collection. You'll be surprised. You may have your name in the Burton collection if you're from the city of Detroit, and different information. So you can deep dive on so many raw records of not just the newspapers and like microfiche and stuff like that, but even like magazines that are no longer printed. When I went and looked up my late godmother, Orthea Barnes, it's like files upon files of her in the Burton collection. And you can find this stuff in the Burton collection if you want to find access on things. That's like almost a starting point of if you want to find things on Detroit history that I would start with. Then I reach out to some of the people, because you can read those stories and then see who's still alive or who's connected to those families, and then connect
You
with
are correct. There are a lot of primary documents, like cards, letters, things that most people wouldn't think to be there, and people utilize it. Professors, it's heavily used by some of the staff at Wayne State.
So as a librarian, what has that journey been like? How is it engaging with the community? What library are you at?
So one of the reasons why I wanted to be a librarian is because it gave me the opportunity, or gives me the opportunity, to learn something different every day. Because you think that somebody's going to come and ask you a question about stuff you don't know anything about. So it sparks this learning. And sometimes that's true. I've worked in the prison library where I was more of an administrator, and the inmates pretty much ran the physical part of the library. I couldn't really do programs because I'm in a prison, so it was limited in what I could do. Working in a public library is a little different. I have a little more creative freedom, so I'm connecting with people in the community, artisans, people who have things to offer the community, and it is very rewarding. I'm currently at the Skillman branch, which is downtown on Library Street in the end of Gratiot, and we get a lot of tourists, a lot of people who live in the city, and they come in and they're like, I've walked past this building all my life and I've never been in. So it's a very fulfilling experience.
And if I'm correct, that branch has like a lot of blueprints for like cars.
Yes,
and stuff
the
like that.
automotive history is on the second floor of our building. It's separate from us, but it's on the second floor, and you can't really access the materials without a appointment
Clearance.
Yeah, you have to have an appointment. So
All right. And the being in a prison library, what prison and what was that like? What you were saying administrative, like what access to the books, what were some of the people incarcerated, what were they interested in reading?
So I was at Parnell Correctional Facility in Jackson. I commuted for 6 years, and that was probably the hardest part of my job. We had, when I got there was the law library, or the law materials in the just the general materials were mixed in together. So when I got there, I separated them so I can know who was where, because you had to be scheduled to be in the library, no matter what you were coming from. For. So a lot of the men, which it was a level 1 facility, so most of the guys were within 2 to 5 years of going home. When I was there wasn't an arsenal. When I left, they built the arsenal. But the guys would come. A lot of guys would come to the law library. The general library, the books, most of those were donated. There was a prisoner benefit fund, so sometimes there was a budget, and I could order books. But I would do the ordering. It had to go through the business office. It's a big process, so I couldn't just directly order stuff. And then there was like certain vendors that I could order from. In terms of being an administrator, I would say that because I was more like a liaison between the inmates and the other staff outside world. When we had a relationship with the district library up there, so they could place books on hold. Of course, they would have to give their request to me. I would place the books on hold at the library, go and pick them up, bring them back to them, make sure that they got them back to me, take them back to the library, that type of thing. Same thing if their families ordered books for them, I would have to get them from the mail room, make sure that they were from an approved vendor, things like that.
Okay.
Scheduling, payroll for my inmate staff, that type of stuff.
Okay. And now at the Skillman branch, because that is a downtown branch, that kind of brings me to my next question after this one. What's the difference now interacting with that audience that comes in? What are you generally responding to there?
I can actually interact with my patrons and not have to worry about being accused of being over familiar. I'm not restricted in the material, so if it's something I can access, or can tell them where to go get it, I can do that. Creating programs for the children. I like working with the children. So doing story time, it's just, it's different. It's more there, you're there because you want to be there. I noticed a lot of guys, even when I worked in the jail, they didn't read until they didn't have a choice. They were, you're confined, you're isolated, so you don't have anything else to do. So now it's more the patrons are there because they want to be there, and they enjoy reading.
Okay. And being in the heart of downtown and from taking that class on gentrification, and I have a lot of views on it, and some of it is, a lot of people don't agree with, black and white, in the city, out of city, and everything. But what is it like from taking that class and seeing some of those changes active, being at that branch?
More than taking the class, I worked in the jail for 9 years down the street on Clinton and Bobian, old jail. Mostly. Sometimes I would work in a new jail and in Hamtramck. But I've seen the transition. I've seen the big difference, and it is a big difference. I mean, there are way more restaurants. You see people. I'm leaving work at night. You see people walking up and down the street. It's populated. It's not, it's not a ghost town. And most of the people don't look like me. So
you feel the difference.
Witness, yeah.
Okay. And when you were, the reason I asked about the class, because as you were being introduced to that concept, that was relatively a concept that many Detroiters, I definitely think, like, Mayor Kilpatrick, 2005, it was just like, I don't know, that may happen in DC. Because, like, we were
Yeah.
going there. I see it happen in Harlem, but Detroit is
Not
just,
gonna happen.
90% black, and it's still 80% black, but a lot of stuff's different here.
Yes, and like most people did not believe that it would happen. But I think I know this is something that has been in the works for a very long time. And I could be wrong and I could be skewed and crazy in my thinking, but my thoughts are that, the big water fight.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at history and how people move, you're always going to migrate towards a natural resource. We had a natural resource. The homes in Detroit, they don't build homes like that.
Yeah, they're brick. It's funny. A guy from Austria came and I met him at one of those conferences through a guy that writes for Bloomberg, and he's Austrian. And when he came over here to the studio, he was like, and as he was looking at the houses, he was like, yeah, a lot of these houses are dilapidated, and he's from Austria, but he's like, these are brick homes,
plaster. I mean, they don't make homes like this anymore. So I think that's probably what has kept me here in the city. It's like one of the things, I don't want a piece of a house. And why move out in the suburbs? I'm gonna have to come back to the city to do everything because this is where my family is. This is where I'm working. This is where, I live. So
yeah.
Until I can go somewhere warm, this is where I will be.
Okay. And as you talk about warm and connecting with warm, you're going to talk a little bit about Little Homies. You writing children's books. Is this something that sparked from being in the library? I know you said you wrote stories and always were telling stories. What connected you to children's books?
When my son was growing up, he was very oppositional, and I had to be creative with helping him to learn at home. And so spelling words became a book or a story because that was the only way I could get him to pay attention. And there's just stories that need to be told to adults, but to kids also. And to me, it's more gratifying to write for children. I can be myself and it's just free. So.
Okay. So talk about the first children's book you released.
My first children's book was The Empress's New Hair. And that idea came to me one day. I was driving and I probably was having some kind of obstacle with my hair. And it just, once I started to sit down and write it, it just started to flow. But it is kind of cornucopia, if you will, of the many different hairstyles that I have worn and you see growing up in the beauty salon, how women are about their hair and their looks. And also, seeing or hearing people not be appreciative of what they have. Hear people talk about having good hair, just seeing the reactions of how people behave with me, depending on the way that I wear my hair. Those things all played a part in me writing the book, but it basically speaks to embracing self, loving yourself, and appreciating what you have, because you might not have it one day.
Mhm. Okay. And who was the main character? What was her name? What's like the and what was the response that you got from the book?
So the main character was or is Empress Zaina, and I published the book in 2012, and I want to say I got a big response. I had a lot of support behind it, but at the time, I was going through some transitions. I think that's when I shortly right before then is when I started at the prison. So I was adjusting to that. I get the winter blues. So sometimes each year is different, but sometimes I can only do what I have to do. And I can't push myself to do anything else. So that year was really hard for me. And I probably could have done a whole lot more with the book in terms of promotions and getting out in the community. But it fell by the wayside because I couldn't do it. And being an indie author is really hard. You wear a lot of hats. You got to do a lot of stuff. It's a lot of, learning the process and stuff like that. So, but I've kind of resurrected it a little bit. So, people have been picking it up. I know at that time, for Harriet, are you familiar with that? It's like an online magazine. It was featured in there. It was one of the books featured, and I can't remember what the topic was at the time, but I don't know how it got to them, but it got there.
But it got to them.
And or how I even found out about it. But it's still circulating.
Okay. So from that book, and then when I think children's books, it's also like the animation needs to be a certain way and all of that stuff. How did you go about finding animators and your printers? Is it just one of those things, a learning curve?
It was in your network. So I had previously published an adult book, very adult book, and so I kind of had a network and had some knowledge. Sylvia Hubbard was very helpful, and being in the Motown Writers Network was helpful.
Shout out to Sylvia.
So I rely heavily on that,
on
right?
the resources
so I
there.
kind of, although I'm an independent author, I did go to a company to help with the publishing process. I had somebody illustrate, and that's probably one of the things that I'll probably go back and change, because some of the reviews on the illustrations were, I get what they're saying.
It can be, you want
more
it to be
unique,
more expressive, and
more unique
Okay.
to me, because some of the characters do look familiar to some other characters. So so I may change that in the future.
So since then, your next children's
So
book.
my most recent is Like a Salad. And Like a Salad is about two siblings exploring the nuances of skin tones with their grandparents. And that book I was writing in my head, and
I'm big on character names. You know, I'm gonna ask again. What's the main
so
character's
Asir
name?
and Zalani are the siblings, older brother and his little sister. And they compare skin tones to different day-to-day things in their lives. And it's a cute story. Like I said, I was starting to write it, and I didn't finish it, and a coworker called and asked about a book that talked about different skin tones in the family, because they had a patron asking for a book, because they had a little one who was asking why somebody in the family had a different skin tone or was darker or lighter than somebody else. So that put the fire under me to finish that story.
Okay, interesting. Okay, and how has that book been received?
It has been well received. I've gone and I've read it to a few classes in the school. So the children, they like it. Even the older children, like it's for 0 to 6 year olds, but the 3rd and 4th graders, they like it. I think the cover is very appealing. So that is what, yes.
That helps. And when you read and do storytelling as a librarian too, are you like the traditional griots at going to an African center school? I remember I thought it was always cool. Like, do you get into voices and characters, and do you get animated?
I am very animated, and I always have been with Tori. So that's part of what I do.
A great storyteller. And I think definitely for young kids, like, you know, like when you make the spider, you got to arch your back.
You have to get into character, which is it is exhausting. And it's very,
but I guess it can be fulfilling.
It is. You feed off the audience, and it's different for me because I'm not an actor, but when it comes to that, I can do it. Now, I haven't tried to memorize any stories. This past October, I did Room on a Broom, which is one of my favorite stories. And I got a chance to do it at the YMCA, and one of the mothers was like, "You're great." She was like, you embarrassed me. But I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy the, helping to cultivate that joy for reading in the little ones. That's what's important to me. So.
Okay. And then when writing a children's story, because most children's stories are they also like have a premise around like life lessons. Whereas like I guess adult stories, it could just be like for entertainment purposes only. In your style, do you have the life lesson already written out as you go in, and are you like incepting the lesson in on each page, or like what's the process of connecting?
So I don't have a process. It has to come to me. So even with like The Empress is New Here and like A Salad, I try not to be, preachy. But those two stories, there is a moral to the story, and it just happens. I write and it happens, but I try to do it in a way that it's entertaining. So we say edutain. My next book, there's really no moral to the story, but it's very fun, and I guess it is teaching counting in a sense. So, but it's a fun story. So,
okay. All right. And with that, I definitely want to close out with some classic Detroiters different questions. But before I get to that, how do people get in contact with you to get these books and find out more of what you're working on?
So people can connect with me through my website, which is sfhardybooks.com. I'm on Facebook, SF Hardy the writer. Also Stephanie Physique is Hardy. And I am on Instagram under She Nominal Inc. That's SHENOMENALINK.
Okay. So here are the classic Detroiters different questions. What was your very first car? And the year, make, and model, and what year did you get it?
I can't remember the name of it. I could tell you I got it from the dealership on Mac in like at Warren, just south of Warren. It was red, and it was a 2-door.
So that was like neighborhood dealership.
Yeah. Well, no, it was. It was a Chrysler dealership. Not Ray Latham. I think it started with an L.
Okay. All right.
I'll have to. Yeah, I was 17. I don't know. That's been a long time ago, Kari.
Okay.
But it was red, 2-door, so it was more like a sports car, and I want to say it had some. It was a Chrysler, but it had some Mitsubishi parts in it. I remember that.
Okay. Where was the first place you went when you got it?
Probably home. Probably home, because that's what I was told to do. But I use it to go to school and go to work.
Okay. Next question. You are the DJ at the Detroit Fireworks. You get to play 3 songs. It just ended. You're at Woodward and Jefferson. What 3 songs you playing?
What's DJ at the Detroit Fireworks? Okay, I'm gonna play "Outstanding"
Okay.
by Gap Band.
Gap Band.
Why you put me on the spot like that? Okay.
I asked everybody these questions.
I'm gonna play "I'm Every Woman."
Okay, Shaka Khan.
And then I'm gonna play "Bad and Bougie."
Okay. And the very last Detroit is different question. If you could rename Woodward after one person, who would it be and why?
That is a good question. And a hard one.
Mm-hmm.
I would name it after General Baker.
Okay.
And I would name it after him because he did fight for the city, the laborers, and he fought up until he made his transition. It's one of my heroes.
Okay. That's cool. So thank you so much for your Detroit is Different
Thank you
interview.
for having me.
Peace.
Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.